Good evening, everyone. It's Leila Hawken just saying good evening, and I'll go back on mute.
And welcome. I'll start again. This is the regular meeting of the Cornwall Planning and Zoning Association. We are starting the meeting at 7:08 p.m. Commissioners in attendance include Anna Timmel, Phil West, James Laporta, Keith Bodwell, Steve Sicardi. Alternates attending include Bruce Bennett, Christine Gray, and Will Evans. Will Evans will be seated for the regular member, Jill Cutler, who isn't here tonight. The first agenda item is approval of minutes for both the May 11th regular meeting and the June 3rd special meeting. I know the minutes for the June 3rd special meeting probably arrived too late for many of you to read, but as usual, your chairman has read them in great detail, and I can attest, I don't see any reason to amend that set of minutes. So I could ask for a motion to approve all the minutes as written.
So moved. I actually read them all.
Oh, good boy.
I'll second.
Right. And Phil seconded. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor say aye, or raise hands. Aye. Next item is new applications. There are none. Third item is approved regulatory application, action to set an effective date. At the end of our last special meeting where we voted to approve the home business amendment regulation, I forgot that we have to set an effective date. And there are rules about this. We have to publish the effective date of the new regulation within 15 days of the meeting wherein it was decided and voted upon. And secondly, we have to make sure that the effective date is no later than 15 days after the publication date. So I'm proposing that we set an effective date of July 1st for convenience and to give Karen time to get the notice in and to get the Waterbury Republican to publish the notice.
And that falls within the 15-day thing?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So we all spent some time looking at calendars and counting days today. So if someone could make a motion to set the effective date July 1st.
Make a motion to set the effective date as of July 1st.
Okay, Steve, any second?
I'll second.
Okay, Phil seconded. Any discussion? There shouldn't be any. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hands. I haven't. Is that a Keith back there somewhere?
Anna,
Yeah.
Keith sent me a message again. He can't unmute himself. Maybe John can help out with that.
John?
Okay, yeah, I just returned that ability.
Sorry, Keith.
Keith, try now.
Are you there?
It shows him as unmuted.
Oh, is he on a phone?
Yes.
Keith, it might be *6.
So frustrating. Poor guy.
I'd call him on the phone, but that would probably break the connection.
He's muted again.
Yeah, I never saw him on my screen.
All right. Well, I think he can hear us.
Do you want to seat somebody?
If we're going to take a vote, I will seat one of the other alternates, but he can hear us, so he can he can listen to,
I dropped, I think, but
okay. So I will seat. I'm going to think for a second about who's next in line. Both Bruce and Christine were seated last meeting, so it's Bruce's turn again to be seated this meeting. So he will vote for Keith. Next agenda item, correspondence and communications. I think that's from Karen. And she is muted.
I have nothing to add.
Okay. Do you have a zoning officer's report? Next agenda item.
That would be the agenda item that you see listed for the special permit. By the way, I'm having some connection problems, so I'm probably going to go in and out. Can everybody hear me?
yes,
All right. Under my report, I sent you information as to the special permit for the Dunham property down on the end of Pine Street. Did you all get all the packages that I sent you electronically, the minutes, photographs, site plan?
yes.
Yes.
As you can see, there on the site plan is no sign of a fence. But when you go and you look at the property, it is surrounded by a fence that circles the accessory apartment in all four sides. And based on the minutes, as you can see in the minutes, there were issues raised about the appearance of this property or the appearance of the accessory apartment relating to the appearance of the village. I do not feel that I should be signing off on a certificate of zoning compliance when the appearance is changed in some fashion by the fence. I think that that's really your call, because it would mean that you would have to modify the site plan, or you could, or if you feel that it needs to go back for modification to the special permit, that is going to be your call. As you know, with the home-based business regulations, many questions have come up about site plan compliance, and fencing and appearance and screening is a big issue when it comes to businesses, and it can be a big issue when it comes to the appearance of any sort of special permit. And as an accessory apartment is obviously a special permit. So I think it's something that you need to discuss and give me some direction.
Madam Chair, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do notice that Keith is unmuted at the moment.
Very good. Thank you.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, finally.
How many of you drove by the property? I did, Christine did, James did, Phil did. So I'll just make a few comments to break the ice. What I remember about the concerns from the neighbors and the lawyer who represented them was that they were concerned that the usual line of view from the street was not going to be preserved. The open feeling of being able to look across to the field where the children play. That's what I understood at the time. When you drive around the property now, you see that there is a very tall privacy hedge around at least two sides, which effectively blocks all the view. The fence that's towards the back of the house and around the side of the accessory apartment is nowhere near as much an obstruction or an eyesore in my mind than a privacy hedge. But Cornwall regulations do not limit privacy hedges, correct? You hear me, Karen?
That is correct. That is
Okay.
correct. Landscaping, hedges are landscaping.
Right. So my own impression is that the commission could just, if you led me to believe that we could decide to modify the site plan ourselves. Is that correct?
Yes, you can, that would be your decision to modify the
So
site
that,
plan.
so that we would, yeah, we would accept not moving forward with a whole new special permit process. That's my take on this, but
So I have a. I
go
have a
ahead,
question.
Bill, your
I'm
turn.
looking at, I'm looking at the, the PDF that was sent, that has the Planning and Zoning Commission special meeting February 19th. Right, that has the picture at the end, the
Yeah.
drawing. That's the site plan we're talking about, right? That's the one that they submitted with it?
Yes,
Sorry.
that's what they submitted with it. There was no fence around, there was no four-way fence around it. It was all natural landscaping, which is, the
So the thing that
landscaping.
says, that's, so there is the fence line, was that the existing fence? Because there is a notation near the,
It's too bad, there's no way to share that.
Near the brick path that says
yeah,
gate.
near the brick path.
Christina's looking at it.
It said, there's a word that says, there's an arrow that points to fence line. And it points to a gate.
Well, yeah, it points to a hedgerow and a,
Well, it does say, it does say fence line though.
does it say fence line?
Yeah, right below where it says gate, right above PVC AWW.
Oh, yeah, fence line. So I guess my question was, and this is from a building standpoint, obviously they don't have to meet building code for a site plan approval, but pools have to have fences around them.
Right.
So this shows a pool fence, but it's restricted to the building and not the perimeter of the property. Is the fence that was constructed now standing in place of the pool fence, or is there a secondary fence inside? Is the fence drawn on the site plan installed as it's shown?
It's acting as both, I believe. It's acting as a fence for the pool, but now it goes around the entire house.
I did not go around the back of the property. I only drove past it on the road, so I don't know about the rest of the fence.
I didn't get to walk in to see if there was a secondary pool fence in there.
No, I mean, we all just drove around, so it's hard to
I mean,
see.
I really didn't notice the fence except for where the gate is on to the driveway.
That was my experience. Yeah.
I
Noticed the hedge.
mean, I noticed the hedge.
But the hedge was not part of the special permit process. That's just,
No, it wouldn't.
Anyone
need to
can
be.
grow a hedge.
It wouldn't need to be.
Right, it's landscaping.
Yeah, and actually, it looks like with the curly lines, it's indicate. I think those curly lines are indicating a hedge
the
anyway.
existing hedge, correct?
'Cause there was hedge on that side, on the side where the driveway goes in. There was some hedge there. It just, there wasn't any around the front of the building, I think originally,
So
which
I know-
isn't part of this at all. Right? So,
in general, in the Cornwall Village zone, are you required to get permission for a fence?
That's an interesting question because fences have been put up without permits that needed permits.
Okay,
so you're supposed
Now
to,
now the zoning regulations are being changed in that they require permits, including building permits for
at the
certain
time,
heights.
at the time that they pulled the permit, was it required that they pull a permit for a fence?
No,
Really?
that's the problem. This is a special permit. They constructed the accessory apartment and then continued to put the fence around the entire property. It was not on the site plan. And no, they
And-
didn't ask to modify their
Oh.
permit. They're following the site plan for the special permit.
I didn't see the whole fence. Does the fence go around just the accessory apartment or does it go around the whole property?
Whole property, the back of the big house as well.
So that would be, I mean, that's sort of separate from, I mean,
I guess the
sort of
question,
separate from the accessory apartment special permit,
if
right?
they didn't have the special permit active, would they have to pull a permit for the fence?
Correct. Yes.
Yes, you approved a site plan for the accessory apartment and the perimeter and area around the accessory apartment.
Right.
And that,
But-
and
Mhm. What Karen is trying to explain is that when we have approved a site plan, the owner cannot willy-nilly change things in that site plan without coming back to us.
Change things that require a permit. For example,
Change anything that was on the site plan.
anything,
No,
they're
that's not
not
true.
calling out specific,
You could plant a
they're
tree
not
or something
calling
like
out
that.
grass, they're not calling
No,
out,
no, we're talking about, right.
structural changes.
there are limits to site
Structural change.
structural. Okay,
So, I mean.
If there hadn't been a pool on the property before and the special permit didn't specify one, they wouldn't now be able to put in a pool without a separate,
if there had,
without going back.
if there hadn't been a tree on the special permit site plan.
Madam Chair, may I jump in just for a quick second?
Please.
Okay, so just on page 36 of all your zoning regulations, so it's section 8.5, it's general standards for special permit. If you get down to point 3, it reads, the proposed use and proposed building shall conform to the following standards. And then we get down to C, in making its decision, the commission shall consider the following: the location, size, layout of the proposed use, the location, nature, and height of buildings, walls, and fences, the nature and extent of landscaping, buffering, lighting, and signs, the location of access and parking. So that's as written in the zoning regulations, page 36 for general standards for approving site plans associated with special permits.
So in other words, you're saying to us that if they had planned to put in a fence around the whole place, it should have been on the site plan.
Correct, or they should have brought it to the attention of the town and talked about the process through which they could modify the site plan.
So I just have a question. So the only part I'm confused about is, I mean, the site plan didn't include the entire property, right?
I don't have it in front of me.
It should.
I don't think the drawing in that, gotta find it again.
No, it's only right around.
Only the corner, right around the, it's only right around the new building and the proposed pool.
I think that's just a scan of it. I don't know if that was the original.
Original plan, remember this accessory apartment is accessory to the big house on the corner, which is surrounded by
Yeah,
shrubs,
Can I ask Karen? how did you
driveways, garden,
discover
and then
this?
there's another,
Sorry, Karen. Was there a complaint?
for the 19th.
there was not a complaint.
No complaint. You're just doing your due
And
diligence.
let's go,
Karen,
that's correct, because it looks,
for clarity, how high is the fence?
Not very.
I can't see over it.
Like I said, not very.
I'm curious if
Yeah.
there was a justification given for the mission of the fence in the site plan.
It's at least 6 feet tall.
Isn't it important here that if there's a regulation that we're supposed to be following or they're supposed to be following when they're doing new building, that we shouldn't just say, yeah, we'll change the site plan. Shouldn't we require them to come back with a change or an alteration to that site plan? If it's, as Phil said, if it's in a different area that wasn't even dealt on the original site plan, then that's a whole nother issue that they also need a permit for. And I think that all.
I agree with Drew.
permits.
I do too. So we can we request that the owners or their representative modify the site plan? They
Is
have,
that-
they have
Well,
to submit a modification showing as-built fence.
Does that require a brand new special
They
permit
can-
process?
Should just be a modification.
I would think there could be some changes. That's not unrealistic that you're building something and you make a couple of changes. I don't think it should be that written in concrete.
Let's give Karen a few minutes to break through the barrier of the technology and answer the question whether it would require a new special permit or just a new site plan.
Hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As you know, a special permit addresses the character of the neighborhood and the appearance of how this special permit, and in this case, the structure changes the appearance of the entire property. So this accessory apartment is accessory to the primary residence. And in most cases, your accessory apartments are not distinctly fenced off from the house, the building that they're accessory to. My observation is that the fence makes it appear that it is not accessory to the primary residence. It is its own residence. And the fence can be, if you look at how you hide, if you wanted to hide trucks, a fence is a great thing. If you want to have the appearance of a property in which you have a primary house and an accessory apartment, part of a campus, is it the same thing? And I think that that's an issue that you have to think about and you're going to be dealing with your home-based businesses as to the appearance of the property and how the additional structure or whatever changes, modifies, improves, or detracts from the appearance of the residential property. In
Which
this case,
implies-
does the
yeah.
fence make it look like it's a primary residence with an accessory apartment? Is that
And
what you intended it when you approved it without the fence? It's something that you have to consider, and it's going to come up again and again.
So,
Go ahead,
So-
Phil.
I think I can't, obviously I haven't seen enough of it because didn't notice the fence between the house. So are we saying there's essentially a fence around the entire property or a lot of it? And then there's also an additional fence around the accessory apartment and pool area? You're muted, Karen. John, Karen's muted.
Oh,
Karen,
I'm sorry, we had a
Yeah,
burp here.
did you hear me?
Your question, Phil,
So
or your
there's,
observation?
so I didn't notice the fence really. I noticed the hedge and I noticed the gate because that's what I could see easily. Are we saying there's a fence around the property, the accessory apartment and a fence around the other property as well? Both, so there's two fences, part of which is shared by a single fence. Right, this essentially is a fence with a fenced-in corner of it.
The fence around the accessory apartment is around all four sides.
yes, but
There's
there's
other
not,
fences on,
okay.
Wouldn't it be a simple matter to just require them to do an additional permit and we can all go down and take a look at it? Maybe have access to the property to see what's going on. And then when that special permit comes in, or when that permit, I didn't mean to say special permit, I mean a fence permit comes in, we can be a little more knowledgeable about what the situation is and comment on the request for that permit.
Well, that's still, sorry, James.
Sorry, I was trying to find where we specify our regulations revolved around fences. Does anybody have that handy? One of the issues I'm thinking about is for the special permit process, we do specify things like landscaping, et cetera. I'm wondering if most of that was put in place to actually mandate that they put a fence somewhere to actually be more of a screening, as opposed to if they didn't have this special permit pulled and they wanted to put a fence around their accessory structure or a goat shed or what have you, could they then come, or could they just put a fence up as long as it's within some type of, meets our regulations. In which case, I wouldn't then think that we should mandate that they can't put a fence just because they had happened to pull a special permit in the past.
I think the point Karen's trying to make, and nod vigorously if I'm right, Karen. There was a public hearing at which neighbors came and represented their interests and their concerns. And they did not have the benefit of seeing a site plan that showed a fence. We don't know if any of the neighbors would have expressed concern about a fence. I think the one neighbor represented by a lawyer might very well have. So if we are going to rectify this situation, the people whose rights were violated were the neighbors. And we need to have a new site plan and a new public hearing. Is that your sense, Karen? Can't hear me. Janelle,
I think. I will quickly say I am a little bit on the, oh, I shouldn't say a little bit on the fence. That is not the proper thing to say. I just felt that there was enough of a change that the commission was obligated to relook at it and make sure that the original intent that was stated and the original concerns that were stated by the neighbors were followed up on and respected. And so I think that there does need to be in some fashion a review.
well, the review is one thing, but a decision about what to do about it is another. Do we, who do we wind up, no matter what our decision is, we're going to penalize one group versus another. In one decision would penalize the neighbors, who have, by the way, not complained about the fence. And the other decision would penalize the homeowner. It's not cheap. It's not cheap to do a special permit hearing.
Can I answer to James's question about fences in the regulations?
Yes.
Okay, so just for all of our education, fences are in the regulations 7 times. The first time they appear in the inner corridor, which is not applicable for our purposes of this discussion. The second time they're mentioned in site plan requirements. And that's where 6.6 is what's required with a site plan. And that outlines, so per Cornwall regulations, which is your guidebook, location, dimensions of all existing buildings, proposed buildings, driveways, parking, loading and storage areas, and drainage features, location of fences and walls, natural and artificial water features, wetlands, and exposed rock ledge. So fences should be incorporated into a site plan per your regulation 6.6.2 F. And then the third place where fences are mentioned is again in the special permit section, 8.5 C2, which is what I referred to earlier this evening, the location, nature, and height of buildings, walls, and fences. That's referenced in what needs to be mentioned with a special permit application vis-a-vis a site plan that gets submitted with that. And then we get into fences. It's not germane to our discussion. It's about erosion and sedimentation control. And then we get into another piece about fences and berms for erosion and sedimentation control. And then the 7th and final mention of fences is in the definition of structure. Fences are not to be included in the definition of structure. So those are 7 places are where your current regulations govern fences.
And hopefully someday it will all be in one place.
So
Right
in just in response to that, so site plan requirements, that's just showing the location of those things, but not mandating that you get a permit for a fence,
Correct.
right? Because it also has natural and artificial water features, wetlands, exposure.
Exactly.
You're
Yeah.
just spelling out where the location of these things are. So
Yeah, just so you guys all know what's currently in your zoning regulations about fences.
Okay. And the
So
way
that-
the way I read it is that they should they were remiss in their site plan. So they should, if they had planned for a fence, they should have included it. I
Correct.
don't know how you do
Or
that
when they,
after the fact.
Or when they decided to put in a fence, they should have asked to amend the
existing
site
site.
plan.
Right.
So I actually have no problem with the
Just
fence
to be,
itself,
just
but
to
I have
be
a problem with
clear,
the application was incomplete.
just to be clear, the question is that they can be compelled to take down the fence. They
Correct.
can be told to take down the fence. It's not on site plan. I
Or,
could say take it down.
construct the fence that was on the site plan, get their approval, and then reconstruct the fence that doesn't require a permit.
Boy, oh boy, oh.
I think we should be considerate whether and make sure we don't use this case as an example of what the planning and zoning might be able to do from a power perspective.
Right.
Because why?
Well, I think this points to a conversation we've had in the past that we need to clearly address how one must deal with modifications in the regulations because it isn't clear. So that there's a very clear remedy for an applicant that then it went out in the field, build something different than what the site plan indicates. So I think that's a point to note, to work on for future, because it would help for the commission to have clear guidance, and then it would also help for the applicant to also have that clear guidance. And moving forward, I would certainly consider as a commission what has done in the past when similar situations have occurred, much like this one, where there was a modification to a site plan. What was the remedy, and what was the best way to come into compliance?
I mean,
Does Karen have any history to relate in that regard?
Well, I would just like to add one thing. I think the question here is also, and Janelle and I have talked, it also puts the zoning enforcement officer in an interesting situation to try to decide what is the best way, and brings in some personal, some personal opinion. And the reason I brought it to you was in some fashion, I felt that it did change it enough so that I could tell them that they had to take the fence down. But I did not want to do that without you understanding or you supporting my decision, because if I make that decision, I go to ZBA if they take an appeal against my decision to deny them a certificate of zoning compliance or zoning permit for this property.
I don't think we should be jumping to that kind of,
Yeah, for the
Yeah.
record,
Yeah.
Karen, we've spoke about it, but I wouldn't have taken that position.
James, you had
I'm-
something to say?
But I still have a concern that we might be overstepping our bounds of what we can and can't regulate. Because obviously you can call those things out in a special permit. But if we don't specifically regulate and require a permit be taken out for someone to put up a fence, and then I don't think that then historically we have the right to deny that person from forever putting up a fence. That's not part of them as a property owner. They have the right, just like any other property owner, just because they happen to pull a special permit that for a specific area of their property, then that does not then preclude them from forever in the future planting a hedge or doing something else, even though in the special permit process, we clearly defined we can control some of these things, but that doesn't say that they can never add anything in the future. So I would just be cautious in terms of then saying, hey, you got to take that fence down before we actually make sure that we cover our bases. And also, do we have anybody in the neighborhood that's really upset about this situation?
Yeah. And always keep in mind that we are here to serve the residents of Cornwall, the community at whole. So these people you can look at them as one of our customers. We need to figure out something to resolve this, but taking down the fence doesn't sound like that's a logical route.
Also, I just want to add,
Can I just add,
I wasn't at the original meeting, So I didn't get the flavor or color, and I'm sorry if, I probably shouldn't be even. I should probably
The flavor was that there was one neighbor who was upset and they brought a lawyer.
Well,
That's upset.
yeah, that's. in
Can
the-
I just interject one thing? And please do not think that I want to cause the Dunhams to have to take down the fence. But I don't want to be perceived as not doing my job by saying that that could be whether a decision of the commission or in some fashion, if I was directed to do so. This, as Janelle is saying, there has to be a clear process, and this is a topic of discussion, and I'm glad it's coming up right now.
Why don't we just, as a commission, agree to modify the site plan ourselves?
Well,
Janelle,
Anna, what I would suggest, from my experience, is actually have the applicant bring you a modified site plan so that you have an actual scale drawing of what's out there in the field as it was built. And then, stamp it as received in the town as an update to this special permit, and use it as an educational piece for just a part of, what happens when a modification happens. And then the commission can review it. Let's hope that fence isn't on a property line or beyond a property line, and just, take it in as received as a modification, accept it as a modification, as an updated special permit. And then this is on my to-do list as far as what needs to be clarified within the regulations, how one would then handle a modification in the future.
I like
yes,
that.
thank
I
God.
agree with Janelle.
Now, let's make a motion that that's what we want to do.
But
I
you
will
can-
make this motion.
I think just in,
We'll have a discussion after the motion
Yeah.
has been moved.
yeah.
I've made a motion that we do what Janelle said in the language that she said it. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Steve, is there any further discussion? We will have a vote. All in favor, say aye or raise their hands.
Aye.
Aye.
So Bruce did not vote. Oh, he can't. Sorry, Bruce, you were seated for Keith.
Right.
Did Will vote? I didn't see his vote.
I did.
Good.
Okay, thank you. So that's unanimous, and what an interesting discussion. Lots of troublesome areas. Other business,
I'm sorry, if and when the regulations are rewritten, that also may be something we consider as making clearer.
that's
know,
what Janelle just said.
No, so-
Or we can
that's
say
on our list.
slightly modified.
Right, right.
You're not-
All right, other business. Karen, do you have any other business? Does anyone have other business?
Hold on.
Moving along, we have our workshop meeting. And I'm going to launch right in. We wanted to have a discussion about a communication policy for the commission. I'm going to ask Phil to begin the discussion because he advocated strongly for us having this agenda item. Share your thoughts.
Yeah, so I know a couple things. I know that typically, like, we don't have to allow public comment at meetings unless it's a public hearing. I believe I'm correct in that.
Mhm.
Secondly, I also feel like that, we're members of the community, and, a lot of the insight and the direction that we get comes from our individual communications with the community and comments that people add or questions that they have to understand more about what we do in our meetings or that are in the regulations or why we do something or another. There's two parts to this. I think that there's sort of a question and answer type thing. Like, I think, what if this happens? I mean, that one's a little bit of a rabbit hole, right? Because you can play what ifs forever and never get anywhere. So I think we should have a limited set of question and response, but like, I think there should be a way for people to understand more about what is in the regulations and what planning and zoning does and the various parts of planning and zoning, right? As more and more people get involved in the community and making Cornwall happen. I think that there's also potentially a place for people to make a statement. I think in order to, since we're all volunteers and we've had like 12 meetings this month for planning and zoning already, I think that we need to somehow limit how long we spend on conversation in a meeting, because I mean, I don't want meetings to go on forever. For, I know everybody in Cornwall, and I know that we could sit here and talk till midnight and still not be done with the conversation. But I think that setting up some way for people to either write questions or have statements. I know that we can have communications, right? That they can send in communications. But somehow I think that we should also talk as a commission on how responses to some of the questions get answered. So it's not necessarily just me or just James or just Anna or any one of us answering the questions the way we think, it's obvious that the answer is, because sometimes we might have a slightly different take on it. I'd love to see an easy way for us to, before the meeting, have sort of, if people have questions, to put them in and somehow denote that this is a question for the commission, not necessarily just something on a public hearing thing, but whatever kind of questions. And depending on the number of them that, beforehand, we can sort of come up with a way to draft responses and give those responses, if we can at the meeting, and if not, we should put them on a list of things to come up with answers for the next meeting. That was sort of my sort of take on it. I don't want meetings, like, if we're going to have effective meetings, we can't just go into a ongoing conversation about 7 different things in meetings. But I think it's important for us to be able to answer questions that people have. And I want to do it in sort of a controlled way so that things don't get out of hand.
Thank you.
That's kind of why I wanted to do this.
Any other commissioner have some thoughts about this?
I do. It just brings, I wonder if there couldn't be a controlled meeting in which, I mean, almost like a Dear Abby, is that, I don't know if anyone would write in with questions, because a lot of the times the questions are pertinent to specific applications. But if there were questions that we could answer, I don't know if the deliberation process is something that would be interesting to watch as well. I mean, educational.
Rocco's not on, is he? No.
I
Yeah, I mean, we could potentially do something like, have a separate section in our planning and zoning part of the website that's a, questions asked and answered, or FAQs for, over time.
And we may not be able to get to all of them, but we can set aside a certain amount of time every quarter or something like that to answer questions.
Or some at a meeting, but I think if there was a way to make sure that there was a separate section somewhere in one place of the questions that got asked and answered. If it was on the website, it'd be great, because then you could search it and you could be like, oh, I wonder if anybody ever asked this before, and then put it in and get the answer to it, maybe, hopefully. Then they wouldn't have to ask again.
I want to ask,
I'll be quiet.
yeah, I want to ask the other commissioners to have a chance. James, have you put any thought into this?
I like the idea. My only hesitancy is kind of more from a legal standpoint to make sure that we don't, a lot of things, well, a lot of stuff is special permit related, and obviously that's stuff that we shouldn't be discussing outside of the public hearing process, et cetera. But even otherwise, we might be kind of interpreting regulations from our personal perspective, and then that might get sticky if we misinterpret something or someone else decides to interpret a regulation a different way. So, obviously I like the idea. I think communication's always better, and it probably alleviate a lot of anxiety that the community might experience around planning and zoning stuff. But unfortunately, it seems like that's been kind of the underlying theme since I've been on the commission from other counselors, et cetera, is there's always this kind of legal underpinning that you have to be careful of. So as long as we don't jeopardize that aspect of it, is however the communication happens, that we're still make sure that we're still not overstepping our bounds or causing further harm.
Keith, what's your idea?
Yeah, I get a little nervous about opening it up. We do already accept correspondence, do we not, from people? We read the correspondence at the meetings. If the land use office receives any correspondence, they get read.
That's correct.
So there is already a method for people to communicate with the commission.
But not a method necessarily for them to get an answer.
No, I just worry about opening up Pandora's box, and I also worry about some of the things, like James said, by putting answers out there, is it us giving, legal opinions and things like that?
Okay, that's fair. Steve,
Yeah, I just
what
have a
about
nervousness
you?
about it.
I get it. And Steve, what about you? What are your thoughts?
They were good ideas, and any more communication is definitely better. I like the fact, though, that when people do come to our meetings, not so much now with everything on Zoom, but certainly when we were at the library, if they had enough interest and put enough effort to come to that meeting, which is not exciting, I think they should be able to speak. So I invite the public to speak and have a little bit of dialogue with them. And you're very good at actually getting these meetings done by 9 o'clock. So I don't see it as a dragging on, but I think we should welcome the public any way they want to come.
Okay, that's another interesting viewpoint. How about Bruce Bennett? What have you thought about? You haven't been on the commission very long, but you've certainly been on it intensively.
That's for sure. I actually need a little clarification and a little more understanding of what the situation is. I think when I first got involved, we took a vote about letting the public participate in our meetings, and I was confused about that from the very beginning, because if we're doing a zoning meeting where we're trying to make decisions about which way to go in certain situations, just like this whole fencing thing, I'm not sure what input the public really should have in that. That they're there and that they're listening, I think is fine, but to be able to start having conversation with them, there's how many of us, 8, 9 of us, now we're adding in another, well, according to the number of people here, 42 people, 44 people who could start throwing out questions and comments, and it just seems all too confusing to me. So I'm kind of not really sure why, Phil, you want to start having input from the public into decisions that the zoning commission is trying to make on its own.
So I wasn't necessarily trying to solicit comments on every decision we make, but I know that people do have questions about some things in the zoning from time to time, like the people that sit through an entire meeting when we had them in the library, of which there are occasionally one, maybe two or three. There were never very many, but I just I mean, I think that there are certain things that we could answer that would be appropriate to answer for clarification. I think that also there are maybe ideas of things that in the POCD that people might encourage us to look at sooner than later. There might be, I think that, when it comes down to obviously if there's a change to the zoning regulations, it's going to go to special permit and we're going to have plenty of comments. If we're talking about some regulation, maybe I don't necessarily think that it's there. I think that sometimes people just come with questions of why a regulation is one way or another, and how the process works. I think that I don't know. I think that that's kind of why I think that, some sort of written, our ability to answer questions through a written correspondence is the best way, because like James was saying, I don't want it to be the interpretation of one of us. I'd rather it be, something that we all participate in formulating the answer to somehow.
Yeah, I think the way the public meeting went and the input that the public had via written communications through Karen's office was fabulous.
Yeah,
and I
so this is really sort of more outside of the special permit process, right?
Right, but
For
then
not include, this doesn't include this. I think the special permit process has its process already, right? Communications come in, they get
It's the
sent to all
public
of us.
hearing process.
Yeah, there's a
Talking
process
about
for that.
non-public hearing meetings.
and
It's,
why are,
it's
and
how,
why are we trying to make all our zoning meetings public hearings? I think is my question.
There is a
That's,
kind
that's
of,
my same question too.
there's
Yeah, I'd
a
second that.
tradition in Cornwall that does not exist in other towns around us. And so we have a certain amount of public expectation.
Yeah, and
I'd
remember,
like to hear what Will thinks. Can you get a word in edgewise, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I think a Q&A forum of some kind could be beneficial, dependent on the matter at hand. I think there's a few different flavors, particular to legislation like home business. I think it would have been great to be able to answer a majority of the questions. I do think that could have quelled some of the frustration from the public there. For everyday meetings like this, discussing implementation of a fence, I don't think that probably needs a specific Q&A forum. So that's my general thought.
What do you think about public commentary in general?
I think it's very beneficial.
Okay. If I might now get around to just sharing my thoughts about this. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. One of my long-term goals for the commission has always been to have a role in promoting education of the general public. I've just heard so many stories about people coming to Karen and not understanding anything about what they were getting into. We're probably not going to stop that completely, but I think we need a mechanism for helping people to understand what zoning is all about and what our regulations specifically say. And I think a Q&A page on our website set up by Rocco, where people could send questions to the land use office. If there are questions that would be of interest to the general public, we ask Karen and Janelle, you're going to be charging us more. I hope Gordon can handle the budget. Janelle and Karen will write a preliminary answer, send it around to the commission. If we all agree with it, it gets posted and shared with the person who wrote. So that's how I would handle the educational part and the question part. If the question is about a specific concern that an individual has, then it would be Karen's job to answer that question. Next, public commentary. I really don't think it's appropriate for the public to make comments about our general meetings, like Bruce said, or like Will said. Nothing on this agenda should be of any concern to the general public in the sense that we would need to hear anything from them. Of course, people have ideas. As Phil said, they might want to make statements. They might want to make comments anyway. And I would rather that those comments were well thought out and not spur of the moment blurted out. And so I would like to see them in a written form. I would like us to recommend that people who want to speak to us or communicate with us do so by sending written information to Karen, who will send it around to all of us, and acknowledge that we have received it in the next agenda. So those are that's my take on it all. And I think I may have just covered everything that everybody was concerned about, except for what Steve said about, you know, the nice interactions with individuals. And I remember having some of those, Steve, when, you know, Hector Prudhomme and Joanne Wojcik would be the only people coming to our meetings over and over again. And we'd have some informal discussions with them. But I suspect that those days are long gone.
They may be. Are we ever going to get back to in-person meetings, or is it going to stay on Zoom? What do you? I don't know if you know the answer, but
well, maybe Gordon, who's on this meeting, could answer that question, or maybe John knows when we're going to go back to in-person meetings.
Yeah, every other town is back to in-person pretty much.
I like Zoom.
Well, did Gordon sign off? No, here he is.
Oh, he's there. He's thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's going to be up to the commissions somewhat. I think also the state is still wrestling now that everybody's used to Zoom. They're not going to let you just go back to in-person meeting. They're going to make you have a hybrid option, which I've seen that be a disaster in places. So again, I think the commission has to be comfortable and be able to handle that. Certainly the public's right to observe public meetings is paramount, but also the ability to manage the meeting is also a consideration. So again, I think there's not gonna be one size fits all on this issue. There's a difference between a park and rec meeting and a planning and zoning meeting too, as far as interest. So again, it's something we're gonna work on, and I think we will get back to in-person meetings. Certainly town meetings, and I think the legislation and what's towns are being allowed to do. I think town meetings are back to mandatory in person. But I did see a neighboring town have struggle with a hybrid town meeting. So I think we're going to be working on that through the summer, but it's also if you're balancing out, what's manageable, how things work. And again, whether people are in person or there. I mean, my thought is you're probably getting more participation now than if everybody, the 42 participants had to be there in person. You're probably not gonna everybody want to sit squirming in their chair as we spend an hour talking about somebody's fence. So anyway, it's something we haven't had a chance to really reckon with, other than to figure that one size is not going to fit all, and it's going to be relatively painless for say inland wetlands or park and rec to go back to in person. Managing a bigger crowd is going to be, needs some thought, which we haven't had the time to think. We're getting there though.
All right, so we'll leave that problem for a future discussion. Could we possibly put together and agree on a communication policy from here on in that could always be changed as our needs change? I don't think that planning and zoning currently has a policy and procedure manual. I know we have some bylaws that date back to over 40 years ago and don't say that much and really need to be updated. We could add a communication policy to the bylaws. Right now, I don't know even what the procedure is for doing that, for amending the bylaws. But I'd like to come out of this meeting with some kind of agreement, something that we could all agree on, some element that we could all agree on.
I propose that we start with the, if it's possible, the town website, see if Rocco is willing to do something of a frequently asked questions or some, post your question, and with no promise at this point that we will necessarily, but at least we can get some kind of sense of where that might go, and hopefully we can address the public's concerns and at least open up that channel somehow, and hopefully it'll be manageable.
Okay, are you making that as a motion?
No, do we want to discuss it further, or?
Yeah, I don't, I think that this is gonna be, I don't think that we're gonna decide this tonight necessarily. I think that, I think I'd like to see a little bit, how our written communication comes, and that if we start with, making sure people know and that they have the opportunity to send us written communication and see what kind of stuff we get. And then if there's questions that we think are applicable to a wider audience, that we think we want to answer or can answer, that for now, maybe after we talk to Rocco and see if he's willing to help us take this on, because I wouldn't want to presume that he has the time or not.
Well, it's just a matter of setting up a page.
Yeah, but it's gotta, I have other problems with the parts of the website and how easy it is to navigate some parts of it. I'd like this to be easy. But I think that if there's questions of that type, I think that we ask the person then, can we make this, one of our initial pieces of a question and answer section, or questions answered, or a dialogue page of some sort? Once we have, a small collection of them, I don't want to start with just one comment and then find out we don't have any questions. I'd rather start with some written communication, put together a collection of things, and then when we have a bulk of material of some amount, then put it up there.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're proposing that we let the public know that we would like them to submit written communication to us that could be comments, statements, or questions. Does that include a provision that there not be public comment at our meetings?
Yes.
I think for now, I think it's really hard to manage on Zoom also. Regular comments. I think that when we get back to person, it's a little easier. Even if there's a bunch of people, I think it's a little easier to manage communication. Everybody has easier time hearing everybody else and things like that.
Okay.
And I think your idea about having it go to Karen, the way the way the comments did from the public, I think that worked great. Sorry, Karen, just one more job for you. But it, it got to Karen, and then from Karen, it got to us. That just worked great. And then we can answer it at the next meeting. I think your idea about that was really good.
Karen, would you like a separate email address for those questions?
No,
apparently not. All right, so I'm going to frame it as a motion just to get it out there. We're going to move to create a communication policy in which there will be no public comment at our regular meetings, i.e. the meetings that are not public hearings. We will encourage the public to share their thoughts, statements, ideas and questions with us in writing.
Mhm.
We will answer. I guess maybe what we should decide for now is that we start with that and then see what kind of communications we receive so we can figure out what to do with them.
Yeah, because a lot of times it's not a question or an answer they're looking for. It's a comment they just want to make. So
Yeah. So the comments are for our information. The statements are for our information. The ideas are for our information. The questions are either going to be specific to them, to the individual, or general to the zoning regulations. And if they're specific, Karen will answer them. If they're general, Karen and Janelle will frame an answer and the commission will then authorize its publication or authorize its response to the individual. And eventually, if we have a web page, its publication with consent from the original letter writer. Have I made that a muddle?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I just want to manage expectations and just say one quick thing. Should the questions that come before the group, you as the commission, potentially be an opinion, a subjective questioning, of which the commissioners would be put in a position to potentially be showing a prejudgment or a bias, it's very important that the commission doesn't answer these like general, if let's just say, for example, someone says, you know, what does the commission think about regulating Airbnbs, for example? The commission probably doesn't want to get too far into answering questions of which a subject application is not before them, because if one looks at the trajectory of the communication, one can point back to the moment in which a commissioner expressed an opinion and it would show prejudgment on an application. So I would just be very, very clear that you're happy to answer questions on procedural questions like, you know, why do special permits require a public hearing versus not? Where there's the statutory framework, it's not really an opinion piece, it's more fact-based. But
Right.
I really want to protect the commission from getting into situations where they're expressing their opinion on an action and that has yet to come before them. And then if some subject application comes before them where they've already had an opinion or shown some sort of bias, that's just something to be so cautious of.
Right.
Sometimes less is more when it comes to these broad brush opinion pieces, just given your role as commissioners.
That is a very important statement. And I really wasn't considering those sorts of questions. When I imagine questions, I imagine them to be, what do this ilk, what do our regulations say about opening a sawmill?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it temporary?
Right. What do our regulations say about blah, blah, blah?
Yes.
Because the book itself is hard to get through. And as you mentioned earlier, 7 different places for fences.
Exactly.
So someone has a question about what do I have to do to get to build a fence? Those are the things that I'm thinking of. And since I proposed that you and Karen would do the answering, you would instantly screen out any risk to the commissioners of forming an opinion ahead of time.
Of course. And I think just for formality's sake, it still comes before the commission as a piece of communication. And
Correct.
then any insight that Karen or myself might have just on, you know, we've read your communication, thank you very much. The commission cannot comment at this time.
Perfect.
Yeah, just to manage expectations that might want to be an optional answer. I just don't want, you know, us to rule on things if it's not an active application. That's just a tricky thing.
Sure. Sure. So our goal is education. Some of the questions are likely to be recurring. That's where the FAQ page could eventually come into play.
Yeah.
But so
well,
to reiterate, we are not going to have oral communication or commentary at regular meetings. We are going to encourage written communications and questions. We will have a mechanism for generating answers. And that's all we're saying tonight.
Yeah, I don't think we need a motion for that either, do we? I mean,
Well, if we're going to call this the P and Z Commission's communication policy, I think all of the commissioners should vote on it.
so, I mean,
I don't want to make this decision by myself.
so.
If anybody on the commission is opposed, we want to know.
Yeah, well, I'm sort of opposed. I think, I don't know, maybe just I'm old fashioned. I like a little bit more of a laid back, not such a rigid set of rules. I understand with the Zoom, we have, 40 people here, and it's certainly, there's a lot of challenges with having that many attendees. But if we want to just sort of hold off on taking public comment while we're on Zoom, I'm for it. But I long for the days where we do meet in person, believe it or not, and then we can have, it's not really public comment, but I guess it is public comment where an attendee wants to say something, and we'll listen. We should listen. I always think of it that we serve the public. So we just try to keep that in mind, that we are here to serve.
How about if we just say that this is the policy we will have for as long as we're having Zoom meetings?
I'm good with that.
Yeah, and then we'll reconsider once we start meeting in person again. I mean, personally, I'm torn between in person and Zoom. I think Zoom is better for the greater public because more people can participate.
It
or
is. It's,
observe.
like Gordon said, it's probably going to be a mixture of both. It's
Yeah,
never
well,
gonna be like today.
But on the other hand, there's lots of communication that goes on in our meetings, both between the public and us and amongst ourselves, that's informal, that's outside of the boundaries of the meeting itself, which leads to a greater sense of community. And that's something I miss about the in-person meetings. So are we going to take a vote, or are we just going to let this discussion hang and think about it?
I think we should just let it hang and think about it. We have uncharted waters ahead of us, so it's to make a decision, I think would be wrong. Just while we're at Zoom, we'll just try to keep, the comments between us commissioners, and then once we get back, we'll navigate through it. And we'll figure something out.
And until that time, encourage people as much as we can to send their
Yes.
letters into the normal channel of sending them to the land use office. And, we will try to answer what we can,
And listen to what they have to say.
especially procedural. I always read what people send in. So if they send something in, I'll read it. It might not happen right away if it's 30 pages, but if it's I will read it. And if there's something we can answer, I'd like to afford them an answer. If it's something that we're, that doesn't put us in jeopardy in some way, or the regulations or the town or whatever.
Is that?
Yeah, I don't think that's a big change from what we already have kind of as a standing policy or whatever you want to call it right now, with that we do accept the communications, and we do tend to
Well, we haven't really broadcast that we would like to have people ask questions.
Well, we should.
Right.
I think we just say, we're sort of doing it now to more people than have showed up in the meeting last year. Except for maybe the last couple, but I think just, if people have questions about how things are, I think we've sort of broadcast it. I think it'll go out on the, I think it'll go out that people have, if people have questions, they should send it in.
That's not just saying it's going to go out. If you're referring to social media, that's not the appropriate mechanism.
No, and this meeting's going to get posted.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to ask a question if they're not interested in it at all anyway. So,
Well, fine.
Of the 40 some odd or 30 people without us that are in this meeting, if the, they
Okay,
seem to be some of the more interested people, and they probably talk to some of the other interested people that might not be here. And I think that as long as they know the best lines.
I
of
will
communication-
ask Gordon to send out to his usual email notification list, a statement from us to the effect that we encourage written communication of the type we've talked about tonight, okay?
Yeah.
That will be the official release of that information, okay?
Cool. Yep.
All right.
Can I ask a question since Gordon jumped in and he's a member?
Caroline, we're not having public commentary or questions this
I
evening.
know, but
No, Caroline, sorry.
you received a comment from,
We asked him.
We asked him. I'm not asking you, Caroline, and you may not just break in and interrupt and ask questions. This is part of our problem.
After a discussion that we wouldn't welcome public comment on Zoom meetings.
Right.
I know.
I think Caroline came in late and she's always full of questions. Those questions have to be written, Caroline. I'm not going to answer them off the cuff. It matters a lot that we give the right answers and that we especially consult with our land use consultants, because we're just amateurs trying to learn and learning all the time. We have another agenda item, and that is to discuss how we're going to proceed with the regulatory rewrite. I hope Janelle can share her documents that she sent around to us. Are you prepared to do that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I sent them to Jonathan as backup as well. Let's hope. Yeah, I had a feeling. So the host is disabled participant share screening. So I did send those. If Jonathan, are you still out there?
Yeah.
Yep, he's here.
Should be able
Okay,
to share
I
now.
sent those to you. So if you don't mind popping them up
I
on the
just gave you
screen.
the
Okay,
share.
I'll do that.
You've got
Perfect.
them open.
So Anna, which one would you like me to share? Are all of the commissioners regarding either document, and which one's germane to our first point of order?
Well, the memo that you sent around with your suggestions about how we proceed.
Okay, let me just pull that up. And then. Perfect. Adobe always wants you to do their survey when you're opening files. It's like,
God.
not right now. Okay, so here we go. Is everyone able to see this?
Yes.
Beautiful. So this was just request of Anna, request of our chair, just regarding where we are and where we want to go. I think one of the reasonings behind this is, I mean, as Bruce has stated, as Will has stated, they jumped into this process sort of in the heat of the moment. So I think it's really important for all of us to touch base as a group, look at what we're doing, look at where we may be going, and then move forward. First of all, have a discussion about how we wish to move forward. And this memo is also, it's been created to provide some background. So back in January of 2020, believe it or not, I was introduced to the commission. I started working with our former chair, and we just discussed with Karen, with Gordon present, just where we were going to go. And my task order was truly fulfill the implementation of the plan of conservation and development. So wherever the Planning and Zoning Commission is included within that document as the lead on implementation, for me to really work and look at the regulations and make sure that they were fulfilling what that plan of conservation and development was saying. So the plan of conservation development was adopted in 2020, and this is sort of our follow-up step as a commission, as this group, to fulfill what the plan of conservation and development is saying. So that said, we got working, we had many meetings. We were doing more of a comprehensive look at the regulations. Where can we make things clearer? Where can we help the public with processes? Where can we help the commission with consistency? And we were just going through, we literally started at the beginning of the document, and I reorganized some situations just for purposes of clarity. just to make the document overall a bit succinct and to really look at where statutes should inform our regulations. So building from the state law into our local regulations. So we were working through, and then we've spent some time on our priority regulations to get them through to public hearing. They've been amended, and now we're at this sort of starting place or begin again place where it's time for us to regroup, talk about where we want to go, and then get going. So I hope, does anyone have questions about our approach or wants clarity on what our scope will now become?
Yeah, Janelle, when we first discussed this a while back, there was a lot of enthusiasm about the regs and changing the formatting, but there was also some work done on some actual more substantive changes. And I recommend that we not do anything of that sort in conjunction with the rewriting of the reformatting of the regs maybe. So that we really keep all that stuff very separate as much as possible. And then if there's any actual change that's gonna address a regulation, that's a separate issue and not wrapped together. I'm trying to avoid the things that happen on big government scales where they where they put some other minor issue into a bill that's unrelated. And
Yeah.
next thing you know, you're like, wait a minute. Did this
Yeah.
happen? So so that's just my recommendation. I'm hoping that that's still your thoughts moving forward as well, is to really keep that stuff separate.
Yeah, and James, the way I think about it, I think just for lack of a better term, I refer to it as like housekeeping. So us cleaning up and organizing, looking at, again, I think a big one that was raised is just where do the regulations conflict? Where do they not provide us with enough information about how to act? Where can they be more clear? So again, back to your point, not substantive changes, not changing districts, not changing uses. That's kind of our starting point of just looking at the regulations with this. Where are they conflicting? Where are things not clear? Where are definitions not in there that we potentially should add just for clarity's sake?
Perfect. Yeah, we had the three colors. I forget what they were.
Yeah.
Blue,
Yeah,
yellow, whatever.
it was blue, green, and yellow, I believe.
Yeah, because some of them were a little, was something that the commission really wanted to address. And I'd rather have that as a separate issue when and not muddle the rewrite with that.
I
The
really
reformat.
appreciate that approach. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll all have to come up with a term so we know what it is that we're referring to.
I should have said rewrite.
Well,
Format.
we're rewriting the regs, but we are not rewriting. Oh dear, never mind. I couldn't come up with it.
So can I get some clarification?
Yeah, of course.
So Janelle, are you saying that, and James, that you all had been already working on this process?
Yes,
in
so
the past, and that you've gotten to a certain point? It would be
But
great.
I think we should start all over again.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. My
And
thought
Janelle
was-
agrees. Yeah. Now we have 3 new members. I don't know if Christine was involved in any of the early work, but the regular members have been here from the beginning. We need our memories refreshed
Yeah. Mhm.
and so I think we need to start from the beginning. It shouldn't, it should go much faster this time around. And we'll set aside, I think what James is saying is that we're not going to do any major amendments of the regulations related to the POCD until we've done the reformat first. I think that's
Yeah, not even minor ones. Let's just reformat it.
right.
and see
Right.
what
And
comes
then
up.
we can take notes as we go along. What are list of things that we would like to work on that would be substantive changes? And then we'll go through those one at a time and have a public hearing for each one. Correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the commission should really just use the guidance of what's in the POCD when they do get to the substantive changes piece.
Correct. Because those are the ones that we've been asked to do.
Mhm.
The town has asked us through the POCD to make those changes. So And if we ourselves as individual commissioners have other ideas, we can tag those on at the very end of this long process.
I do want to add the reason why I do feel like this first piece that James has mentioned is important is just for a lot of questions have been raised about some conflicts, some terminology. We've come across a few situations where we're not quite clear on the process. The process is not enumerated for us as guidance. So I think that's truly the building block of the first step in understanding what the regulations say and just making sure that they're very clear. A big one is just looking at our definitions.
Right.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that what I'd like to do, listening to this is, you know, if we go through sort of the whole thing and figure out what all our definitions are, let's just, and maybe that's not enough for a public hearing, but maybe that, and we're removing a couple of conflicts and then put that out for, deal with that and get that done.
So
And then-
Jane, so not to interrupt you, but I bring you back to that sweater comment that I made at our last meeting.
Yeah.
So it's like, once you pull out one part, so what we've done with our 2 amendments is we figured out where to shove them into the existing set of regulations. So once we start to look at little individual pieces, we'll have to be treating them in their little chapters or in their sections. And what I've discovered, and I think what we've discovered as a group, when you start to tweak one thing, then you're like, uh-oh, where we state agriculture, like we ran into fences this evening. Fences is in about 3 sections of the regulations. So even though we'd like to clean it up in definitions, for example, we would be essentially affecting other pieces in the regulations. So it might, at first step, I love that approach because it's like, let's take this slow, but it gets tricky, just technically speaking, because of the way that how do you work in organization into what's already there?
Yep.
You're forgetting the body of what the regulations say, what they require of us, what they allow the public to do isn't going to change. What's going to change is it's going to be easier for the public to find the information, number one, because it will be organized. Number two, there will be new references to statutory requirements that we are required to update our regs with. And the third and fourth are adding more information, more definitions so it becomes clearer, more steps under procedures so it becomes clearer. All of that, none of that needs to go piecemeal to public hearing. What needs to go to public hearing is a change in what you can do with your property, a change in the zoning districts, the things that James called substantive. So I disagree with you, Phil. I think a piecemeal approach would have us in public hearings until hell freezes over.
No, I can definitely, I definitely understand that. I just,
why don't we start it and try to get through it, get through the process and see how we feel about how to approach, you know, putting the changes in place as we get a little feel for what it is.
yeah.
And would it be, is it, would Janelle, I should ask this too. Janelle, would you be kind of reading over the sections that we would be dealing with at each meeting and bring up the pointers or points that need to be addressed instead
Correct.
of all of us?
Yeah, so
No, she guides us. She does the work.
So,
Good.
so Bruce, what I envision actually, what might be helpful is if we actually take our current regulations, so what we are bound to now, and we do start at the very beginning and we go through, because I think we have to, it's really important for everyone, you know, we have to know what's in there. And I think there'll be a lot of important notes to make. There are some things, a lot of this is not a surprise. And unfortunately, we're not allowed to be very creative because we are so bound by state statutes when it comes to so many things, even our enabling intent and purpose. So our enabling statute, the powers that we're given, those are enumerated by state statute. So there'll be some tweaking of words, especially where the statutes have been updated to reflect that. And that's what I'll do page by page. And this is a very exhaustive way, just looking at, 1.1, Article 1, or statement of purpose. What does it say currently? And then where might it need to be changed due to some word choices? And then, of course, due to statutory changes. So the statutes are constantly evolving when it comes to land use, just making sure that we account for that within our own set of regulations. So yes, basically we would go through, and I really think if we work within the current set of regulations, because that will show us, this is what we're bound to now. So instead of even looking at any other proposed document, and we just go piece by piece, and I'll come with notes, statutes to reference, based upon whether it's a word choice or whether it's like an update that has been made more so in the legal framework of how the state is, run.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's it's great. It's a very thoughtful discussion. So we've been doing these for a few years, and you guys are all a really group with good endurance to look at this document this many times.
The person currently on this commission who is the most familiar with what the current regulations actually say is James. And for years now at public hearings on applications, we've relied on him frequently. I think it's telling. Yeah.
That's the Bible.
I know. We always, by the way, when we meet in person, commissioners are expected to bring their copy of the regulations. And if you had a video of what we used to be like at our public hearings, we'd all be sitting there leafing through it madly, trying to find the relevant sections. I'm envisioning a much more readable document now. And I've been through this document before many of the recent public hearings. I read the whole thing again, and I just continue to find inconsistencies. So it's a very important process. Some of the townspeople are very worried about it. They don't like the idea, but I think in the end, they are going to be very pleased with the product. Anybody else?
We really want to stress that we're not changing anything other than the formatting and making sure that it's up to date.
That's right.
Well, and that we remove inconsistencies.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
But later, when that's done, we can begin tackling the POCD changes, because I think, as I said at one of the public hearings, there were 12 different items for us in the POCD. I'll double check that for our next meeting.
Well, we got 9 more years to do it, Anna.
Yeah, but still, I want to say something. Another thing. 9 years is too long.
Oh, no, I get it.
Turn this massive liner, this massive ship that's
No, I know.
sailing in the wrong
Well, I mean,
direction.
just the 12 POCD parts, I think, yeah, there's plenty there.
So I'm almost ready to ask for approval to adjourn the meeting, with the understanding that when we next get together, we'll start the process with Janelle all over again. I want to share with the commissioners my philosophy of what planning means, because for quite a long time, we did not have a commission that actually planned based on data, based on what we could learn about the big trends in the economic situation in Cornwall, the social situation in Cornwall, the demographic situation in Cornwall. None of that was brought to our attention ever. And we all had a feeling that Cornwall was great, that we could just mosey along forever, doing a little of this, a little of that, adding a Housatonic overlay zone, and changing a few parking regulations. But when I prepared that demographic summary for the Plan of Conservation and Development, I realized that Cornwall is a town in trouble. And it's up to us to help stave off the trends that have already begun. The fact that no one can afford to live here. The fact that everybody, pretty soon, everybody in this town is going to be over the age of 65. The fact that there are poor people in this town getting poorer by the minute. So we have a duty as Planning Commission to know those things, to make it our business to study those things and acquire that information and act on it. And to my knowledge, we have never behaved like that before. So as long as I am the chair, we will be behaving like this. Or I hope to promote that concept and convince you all that it's important.
It's a democracy.
Yeah, it's a democracy. I'd love to be a dictator, but it ain't gonna work.
Wouldn't everybody?
No,
Hey, Anna, can I just address the point for a minute? And just because it was brought up when I participate in these meetings, as first selectman, I think there's no more important work in front of the town than what you all are struggling with tonight, and addressing the trends that are going on. And individually, as first selectman, I get to be on all town boards and commissions. I don't get to vote. I'm an ex officio member, but that's why I tend to talk at these things. But I think the individual decisions are certainly still left up to the board. But I would like to thank you all for your work in wrestling with these things. These are sometimes difficult discussions, but important discussions sometimes are difficult. So thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. You have the long-term perspective. And so our next meeting date, Tuesday, June, I'm going to look at my calendar quickly. We usually set our next meeting.
13th July,
Thank you. July 13th.
is that right?
I will not be here.
Phil will be away.
I will
Okay.
be away. And I'm not gonna call in from vacation.
No, I don't blame you. I don't blame you one bit.
I
All
did.
right. Could I have a motion to adjourn then? We've had a good long discussion. James,
I move.
second.
Second.
Phil, all in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Thanks.
Above.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Goodbye.